In 2009, the like button appeared on Facebook. How did it become so ubiquitous in just 15 years? Why does it feel so natural? We are used to thinking of the like as a feature for expressing approval on a social network. But in reality, it is the complete digital analog of a social mechanism that is not 15 but 200,000 years old. Look at this movement. It lasts just 1/6 of a second. Anthropologists call it the eyebrow flash. It is a universal signal, meaning I see you, you are one of us, I am not dangerous, which is understood in every culture on Earth because it is pre-cultural. It is a deeper evolutionary layer of expressing approval. Facebook did not invent the like. It simply appropriated an ancient human social reflex. We click the button because our brain thinks we are doing this. And that fact turned a newly invented feature into a complex chain reaction that changed the digital space forever. Only functions that touch upon our deepest wiring have such potential for influence. To understand how a simple button rewired the world, we have to take it apart layer by layer. We will break down why Zuckerberg defended the old internet and forums, why the mathematics of algorithms made music boring, and why the US government, after the tragedy of 9/11, began funding the polarization of society through social networks. We are used to considering the like button the norm, as if it is the most obvious interface solution in history. But if we look at the witnesses to this feature's birth, at Facebook in 2007, we see a strange picture. For almost 2 years, Mark Zuckerberg refused to give the like the green light. And this is the same Zuckerberg who was obsessed with the idea of simplifying interactions and pushed likes so hard later on. But back then, the feature was stuck in production hell for 2 years, purely on his initiative. Why was the CEO of a company built on the principle of move fast and break things terrified of a simple thumbs up? Because he saw a threat that is hard to grasp from the perspective of today's world. He called it content cannibalization. Zuckerberg understood the social structure of Web 1.0. If today we have an attention economy, back then it was an economy of effort. On forums and LiveJournal, all interaction happened through text. You had to invest time and mental effort. Comments and posts were high-value assets, not just for people. This seemed like potentially valuable data that Facebook could lose. How do you simultaneously give people a way to interact with much less effort, yet preserve the value of that connection at the level of those forums? Now, of course, we know the answer. You do not. The sad part of the story is that online communities were not formed on social networks, but on forums. People united around common interests, got to know each other, talked, and went to offline meetups. I even caught the tail end of this. I was part of an IT community on a local forum in our city, and later got into the idea of flash mobs, also communicating with people involved in that online. And this was possible because there was a barrier to entry and a limited audience. These were high-cost transactions. You had to be passionate about the idea of follow forum threads. These were sparsely populated permanent communities with a high transaction cost, but also with the potential to build long-term bonds. So why did they eventually decide to make the like? The desire to improve design plays far from the most important role here. Most important were the global processes happening in the world. The growth of computer availability and the spread of the internet led to a boom in the online population. The classic forum model turned out to be unscalable. You cannot have a meaningful conversation with 1,000 people. The friction that created depth, that required immersion, that provided a flat horizontal structure, was now choking growth. Now we can see exactly how it happened, because the most effective survival model was isolation. That is artificial conservation within a small constant group, which allowed the communication model to be preserved. But the external internet broke the old rules. And this brings us to the most dangerous invention of the 20th century. No, not the atomic bomb. I'm talking about the plastic bag. Look at this ad. It is frightening in both its concept and its cultural disconnect from our reality. The concept is cool, eco-friendly, economical, cheap. A panacea for a huge number of problems. We know how that ended. The solution to one problem, deforestation, became a catastrophe in another aspect. And the main reason is the low price. Translated into our language, low friction. Likes are the cellophane, and the algorithms that followed are the plastic bags of the internet. Likes provided the material to solve one major problem, the content discovery. Look at the amount of videos about the algorithmizing your life about returning to an iPod instead of Spotify. I made a rule for myself that before opening the YouTube app, I first have to decide for myself, what do I need from it? What am I going to do right now? Because otherwise that non-ecological interaction between me and the algorithms begins. Everything went wrong, and we even use similar words for these phenomena: ecological content consumption. Only now, instead of a Great Pacific garbage patch, we have a great content garbage patch in our heads, in our systems of motivation, attention, and decision making. And the only way not to drown in this is to stop consuming and start creating. Speaking of technology, I want to pivot to a subject that matters to me: automation, specifically in design and specifically via AI. I've mentioned many times on this channel that while I share the concerns some have about AI, I also remain deeply optimistic. And I want to demonstrate the grounds for that optimism with a concrete example from a real task I recently handled. This segment is sponsored by Lovart, but the example I'm about to show isn't a staged demo, it's real work. Lovart represents a perfect example of a paradigm shift. It's not just a tool, it's an agent. Before the new year, I helped make a holiday concert happen, organized by anti-war artists who had left Russia. I acted as the design advisor for this project. In the process, I needed to quickly draft video transitions and experiment with the composition and placement of artists for media covers. In Photoshop, I would have spent about 10 times longer on these tasks. Or more likely, I wouldn't have done them myself at all. I would have been writing text briefs for other designers. Here, the paradigm shifts. I work as the director of the process, not a pixel pusher. The touch edit feature allows you to interact with a generated image as if it were a layered Photoshop file. Click, move, replace, done. Need to change a headline on a generated poster? Text Edit does this natively, perfectly preserving the font style. As content volume explodes, the only thing that holds value is your unique vision, not your speed with the clone stamp tool. The link to Lovart is in the description. This is a personal recommendation from me. So let's get back from good AI to dark algorithms. Remember, I mentioned the difference between ecological and non-ecological interactions? The tool I just showed you puts you in control. This same pollution became the cause of what we now call toxicity and the polarization of society. To understand how algorithms divided society into warring camps, we need to look not at politics but at music. I remember my first experience with algorithmic search very well. It was last.fm. For those who missed it, it was magic and felt like something obvious yet incredible at the same time. You scrolled your library from Winamp and the service promised to recommend music you would like, based on the tastes of people similar to you. At that moment, as a music lover, I was constantly on the hunt for interesting new music. I had my trusted seller at my favorite CD shop. I shook recommendations out of friends, but my main source was reviews from Rolling Stone magazine. And here, the theory sounded as if all those difficulties were in the past and I would now have a constant backlog of albums to listen to. And the more I listened, the better the recommendations would be. But in practice, a strange thing happened. Instead of rare diamonds, the service kept offering me Radiohead, David Bowie, and The Doors over and over again. The promised expansion of horizons did not happen. I tried many times to hack the system by providing only parts of my library. But I did not hear a single interesting recommendation. This mathematical bell curve, the illustration of normal distribution in statistics, is the reason for this failure. The algorithm did not break, it worked exactly as it should, and it was supposed to work like this. Any unique music is by definition at the edges of this bell curve. The more it differs from the generally accepted, the more likely it cuts off part of the audience. And what tends toward the center is that which does not cause rejection in the majority. And that which is already popular has a lot of connections in the database, and over time the number of these connections grows even more. This is called the Matthew effect. You know it by the phrase, the rich get richer. If the algorithm sees that 1 million people who listen to indie rock also liked Radiohead, it is mathematically obligated to offer Radiohead to you too. It is a statistically correct move. The popular gets more popular. And the conclusion is any recommendation algorithm trained on binary signals, whether it is liking a post or having a track in a library, will always gravitate toward the center of the bell. It is physically incapable of recommending the edges because there is little data there, and random injections of posts or tracks from these spheres yield no result because they are random. That is, such an algorithm is by default incapable of finding the interesting. It can only reinforce the popularity of the already popular. You might have a question then, why am I watching this video right now, which YouTube recommended to me, and it is clearly not from a massive channel? That is true. Modern systems work fundamentally differently. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube are no longer that interested in exactly which videos you like and who you subscribe to. They pay more and more attention to your behavioral factors. And also they understand the content you watch much better. Do you feel what is happening? Algorithms are improving by removing the social element from them. The design is becoming much more individual. It is at this moment that we lose shared reality. Let us trace it. We had online communities where social bonds were built through high-cost participant transactions and a horizontal information system. More people came, and to function we got algorithms based on our interactions which formed feeds where we could actually interact. But they did not give good results, so the only thing social left in them is being removed. And thus begins the flourishing of the era, ironically named the era of social networks. And this new generation of algorithms began to build a personal sphere of content around you that is guaranteed to hold your attention. Objective popularity as a principle of choice yields to subjective safety. The algorithm's task is to stroke the user's ego. Therefore, the algorithm becomes something like a mirror. But why are social networks still called social? Well, because you see user content, user comments. Yes, now these are not your connections. Now it is a stream of endless names and faces. And if in music this just leads to boredom in society, it has much more serious consequences. Because what is safe content when it comes to politics or public issues? I can say it more directly regarding Trump, vaccines, Israel, migrants, Ukraine. Safe content is content that confirms you are right and that your opponents are idiots. Designers have successfully repeated the experiment of psychologist Henry Tajfel, the minimal group paradigm from the 70s. Tajfel proved a frightening thing. To get people to start hating outsiders, they do not need war or ideology. It is enough just to divide them into groups by any criterion, even by the color of their t-shirts. As soon as the line is drawn, our brain switches to us versus them mode. The algorithm automated the drawing of this line. It cuts off everything that might cause you a negative signal or discomfort. This leads to you no longer seeing your opponents as people. You see caricatures created for entertainment inside your bubble. Even your own people in this feed are not real people. They are quasi-groups, information Frankenstein's monsters stitched together from pieces of views that are pleasant to you. We call these echo chambers, and mathematically these are quasi-local optimums. The algorithm cuts off what might trigger a negative signal. This leads to the gap between information bubbles increasing. You no longer see your opponents, you see caricatures of them created inside your bubble. The world starts to seem simpler and clearer. We remember that this same effect exists, for example, in religions which practiced such isolation long before the advent of the digital world. And one more analogy between religion and likes. They are conceived as a tool for connecting people, but work as tools of segregation. Mathematics, designed to seek the best, became a machine for confirming our biases. Is there a way out of this mathematical trap? There is, both globally and individually. We will talk about the global aspect later, but individually add elements of unpredictable chaos and personal taste to your life, including the taste of other people. For example, I have started reading music album reviews again. That is exactly why I do not trust the recommendation feed to find topics for the channel. Every week I manually sift through hundreds of articles, scientific papers and videos. I look for what the algorithm would discard as too complex or unpopular. I collect the most interesting stuff in my weekly email digest. This is my way of fighting the echo chamber. Subscribe, it is free. Link in the description. The algorithm turned complex social fabric into a set of safe average signals that are convenient to feed to a machine, and which forms a recommendation process that is safe from a business point of view. In 2010, Facebook stopped being just a directory of people and became a moderated environment. The reason was this formula, EdgeRank. We talked about algorithms as content recommendation systems, but EdgeRank solved a different, much weightier and ethically ambiguous task. It calculated the depth of your social connections. Smells like segregation. The focus shifted from what you will likely be interested in to who you will be glad to see and from what angle. But more on the angle later. For now, to simplify, we can say that the algorithm's task at this stage is to figure out should it show you a photo of your niece or a post from a colleague. We have already sorted out the first variable affinity. Initially, this was the history of your likes, and later a more complex behavioral analysis to determine what is dear to you. But in itself, this parameter looks linear, a standard like or dislike scale. The weight parameter was designed to fight Zuckerberg's fear of cannibalization, because a like was a cheap currency of interaction. A comment is more expensive, a share even more so. And the third parameter, the ruthless time decay. In the old internet, a forum thread could live for years staying at the top as long as it was interesting. Because it worked linearly, as long as people were writing, there the thread rose to active. In EdgeRank, inflation of these transactions happens constantly, and after just a week for a discussion post to continue living and attracting people, it required 10 times more weight from affinity transactions. And eventually, the coefficient tended towards zero, multiplying the value of all social interactions by zero. In the last chapter, we already talked about how direct sociality disappears from this, and a three-way interaction is born with the algorithm performing the functions of a moderator. What do we get if we multiply these three indicators? Rank equals affinity times weight times time decay. We get a high-pressure system on both sides. For your content to survive, for the rank to be above zero, it is not enough for you to have high affinity. You need to constantly fight the entropy of time decay by generating signals of high weight. As algorithms became more complex, more and more side effects appeared. For example, for EdgeRank, a mathematically justified winning strategy appeared, narrowing your circle of communication. Expensive transactions in the form of comments and shares are now tied not to topics as in forums, but to people. You will not have enough time to conduct such transactions with people who are noticeably different from you. Time decay promoted locking in on a small group of people with whom you have maximum resonance. The algorithm physically pushes weak ties out of your life because they are mathematically unprofitable. Meanwhile, weak ties are your bridges to other worlds. These are people from other social strata, other professions, other information bubbles. Remember our bell curve of normal distribution illustrating why algorithms cannot recommend good music. Algorithms are improving and redefining what is the center of this bell. Instead of a universal information field for everyone, we now have individual bell curves. And the algorithm continues to do its job as before cutting off the edges. Sociologist Mark Granovetter wrote brilliantly about this in 1973, The Strength of Weak Ties. Strong ties, family, best friends are a comfort zone. But from an information standpoint, they are a dead end. Your friends know the same things you do. They read the same books, go to the same places. Redundancy and repetition of information reign in this system. Weak ties, the familiar barista, a former colleague, a random follower, are your bridges to other worlds. It is through weak ties that new jobs, breakthrough ideas, investments, and innovations come. Innovation is always the import of information from a foreign cluster. EdgeRank works on the principle of maximizing engagement. A weak tie is unprofitable for it. It is risky. You might not like it. The algorithm benefits from predictability, so it systematically destroys the bridges between clusters, locking you in a room with people who are your ideological copies. There is a magnificent term, serendipity, the ability to see and seize opportunities in the chaos of coincidences. The brightest illustration of serendipity is Fleming's invention of antibiotics. Simply due to a lack of organization, his petri dishes with bacteria got moldy, and he saw that the mold killed the bacteria. Random events, random connections, random information, this is a natural background for us. The task of algorithms is to remove this chaos. The result is the death of serendipity. Another important task of weak ties is being an empathy gym. Communicating with a barely familiar person, you are forced to choose your words. You are forced to adapt, to exert effort, to read the person, to understand a different point of view. This is serious cognitive work that we have been spared. Our brain, as a reality predicting machine, has gotten lazy. We stopped perceiving the other as a human being because firstly, the brain got out of the habit of doing it, and secondly, it sees no point in it. When time decay and affinity filtered out everyone dissimilar, we ended up in mirrored rooms. And when a different opinion suddenly breaks into this room, we perceive it not as a different point of view, but as aggression. As an attack on the integrity of our world, which obviously a bunch of people think the same way, is objective and true. Information echo chambers became static stable, understandable, and as a result, very convenient for observation and description. Because predictability is exactly what the main client of this architecture needed. Yes, I said client, because a logical question arises if algorithmic segregation is so harmful, if it destroys weak ties and divides society into warring camps, why was it allowed? Why did not anyone pull the emergency brake? There is an obvious and boring answer. Money. Advertising requires engagement no matter the cost, because we are evil corporations. We do not care about the future. As always happens, it is not that simple. Profit explains the motivation of corporations. That is how they are wired. Profit is their main goal. But how to explain the impunity of corporations in these actions? To understand this, we have to return to one of the most terrifying dates in modern US history, September 11th, 2001. After the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, the paradigm regarding information changed in one day. Previously, privacy was a sacred right of everyone, standing in second place after freedom of speech. The new paradigm removed the presumption of innocence and asked you the question, why do you need privacy? Do you have something to hide? The state demanded total information awareness, and sociologists coined the term Iron Nanny, a realistic concept in contrast to Orwell's dystopian Big Brother. But the state is a bad IT guy, especially the state in 2001. Intelligence agencies tried to collect data themselves. It ended in failure, which is actually very logical. When you try to find a signal that makes up 0.01% of the noise, you will definitely drown in it. Automatic filters were needed, but they did not exist, and the conditions for them did not exist. There were no platforms with unified information. The state really wanted to get its hands on huge arrays of ordered information. There is one landmark date, February 4th, 2004. I do not believe in the conspiracy theories behind this, but the coincidence gives me goosebumps. Immediately after 9/11, that legendary DARPA, in the depths of which the internet and the graphical interface were once created, launched the LifeLog project under the direct military leadership of Admiral John Poindexter. LifeLog's task: create a database that tracks a person's threads of life, where they go, GPS, what they read and watch, who they write to, what they buy, what their physical condition is. The LifeLog project caused a wild scandal. Human rights activists and the press screamed about Big Brother. Under public pressure, the Pentagon was forced to close the project. Not because they are kind and your opinion matters to them, but simply because it became clear that without voluntary consent, data could not be collected. People would hide and sabotage, and the quality of data would suffer from this. I said that February 4th, 2004 is a landmark date because it was on this day that the project was officially closed. And on that same day, February 4th, 2004, the website thefacebook.com was launched. I doubt Zuckerberg had any contacts with the Pentagon at that moment. That would be a very boring explanation. A privatization of intent occurred, and it was this alignment of interests that gave the green light for the appearance and development of such technologies. It did not happen immediately. There were several turning points before EdgeRank, and the algorithms of 2010 are exactly what the CIA tried to do 6 years prior. Because when you point a camera at a person without permission, they turn away. But if you give them a mirror, they start examining themselves. EdgeRank filtered out the noise, leaving only a pure confirmed signal about your connections. The interests of the state and the interests of the market coincided in the design of the like button and the algorithm that followed it. The like became that very tool that satisfied everyone, except for the people, of course. But it is known that any sensor is useless if it is pressed rarely. To make this machine work at full power, they needed to force us to press the button every 15 minutes. They needed to turn this action into a reflex. The answer to this challenge was found, as is fitting for our IT topics, in the government labs of Stanford, specifically in the Persuasive Technology Lab under the direction of B.J. Fogg. They wrote scripts for human behavior there, and probably the most famous is B equals MAP. Behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. Put like that, it actually sounds cooler than conspiracy theories. By the way, one of the co-founders of Instagram, Mike Krieger, was Fogg's student. And the history of Instagram's development and the first iteration with a non-algorithmic feed. And the transition to algorithms and the current state with Reels and Stories, all of this is a direct packaging of Fogg's lab research into an interface. For behavior to happen, you need motivation, ability, and a trigger. If the interface removes barriers, makes the action easy, and sends a notification or trigger on time, the chance of action is already high. To make it near 100%, we are left to deal with motivation. And here, engineers borrowed a principle from the gambling industry. To understand how this works, I would like to show a classic experiment by neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky. Imagine two cages. In the first cage, a light turns on, the monkey presses a lever, gets juice, always 100% probability. In the second cage, a light turns on. The monkey presses a lever, but juice comes out randomly with a 50-50 chance. It is logical to assume that in the first cage, the monkey is happier, it gets more juice. But MRI shows the opposite. In the first cage, the dopamine level upon seeing the light is moderate, but in the second, the dopamine level skyrockets. Moreover, it skyrockets before receiving the reward at the moment the monkey reaches for the lever. Sapolsky proved dopamine is not about the pleasure of the result. Dopamine is fuel for seeking motivation for learning. It is the biological formula of excitement. The brain goes crazy from uncertainty, will they give it or not? Because its main goal is to predict the reality around itself, especially regarding basic needs, food safety. And something else, sociality. This works both ways. When consuming content, what will be next when I refresh the page? An ad or a boring BMW photo from a photographer friend or a funny video I will want to send to my friend. But it unfolds much more strongly in the other direction when creating content. Posting something is a direct analogy to the monkey pulling the lever in the cage, and then we wait for the social juice approval in the form of likes, or at least attention in the form of views. Look at the abundance of videos on how to hack Instagram and YouTube algorithms to get a lot of social approval and likes. These videos are a direct analog of the ritual wing flapping of a pigeon. I will explain. This is B.F. Skinner's classic 1948 work superstition in the pigeon. He placed hungry pigeons in cages. The mechanism was set to dispense food at random intervals, absolutely random. The pigeon's actions did not influence anything at all, but the brain, both pigeon and human, is a pattern-seeking machine. It cannot accept that the world is chaos. It seeks cause and effect relationships. What happened to the pigeons? One started spinning counterclockwise. Another thrust its head into the corner of the cage. A third made strange pendulum movements. Why? Because randomly when the food dropped, the pigeon was doing that exact movement at that moment. And its brain decided, aha, I turned my head, got grain. So to get grain again, I need to turn my head. Food dropped again randomly, but for the pigeon, this was confirmation of its theory. Thus, this dependence on a random result is the addictive mechanism of social networks. But if in a casino you play for money, a certain important but cultural abstraction in social networks, one very deep and basic function is touched upon, which makes the mechanism many times more addictive. Combination of an ancient social mechanism with gambling mechanics creates this uniquely powerful mechanism. Ancient, I mean truly ancient. The like is no less than 200,000 years old because the like is a direct digital analog of a gesture that anthropologists call the eyebrow flash. This is a rapid raising of the eyebrows during eye contact, a universal pre-cultural meaning evolutionarily developed gesture that lasts an imperceptible 1/6 of a second. I have not seen such analogies before, so I will take the liberty of claiming authorship of this statement. The Facebook like is a direct copy of this exact social interaction. Not a nod, not primate grooming, but specifically the eyebrow flash. Why? Look at the coincidences. 1. Both are neutral positive. They carry no complex semantic load. 2. Both serve for rapid identification of friend or foe. 3. Both are a status indicator, I saw you. 4. Both require minimal energy expenditure. 5. Both cause roughly the same biochemical reaction, a dopamine stroke. The main difference is the asynchrony. And it is into this time gap that our algorithmic moderator embeds itself, attaching this ancient mechanism to gambling mechanics. But more on that a bit later. The like occupied exactly this category in the digital space, neutral, positive, instantaneous contact. And it is this deep biological nature that makes it so natural. The like appeared only 16 years ago, relatively recently, for a cultural phenomenon. But we, as a society, accepted it very quickly all over the world. This happened precisely because our brain recognized it. Like gestures on the iPhone, which seem self-evident because they are based on the physics of the real world, the rules of which are hardwired deep in our brain. There is another factor making this function vital for our brain. In our brain there is the LCNE, locus coeruleus norepinephrine system, or blue spot. For millions of years, it worked as a threat radar. Until this system broadcasts the signal you are safe, our brain is physically incapable of relaxing, learning, or creating. We are in background stress. Ironically, in Web 1.0, there was no such problem because not due to algorithms, but due to social dynamics, the space felt familiar and with minimal external intrusions. And these intrusions happened according to the rules of real communities. But in Web 2.0, with a gigantic amount of information and micro-interactions with different unfamiliar people, the stress level from this interaction grew significantly. The like or eyebrow flash is that very ritual that reduces stress at the neurotransmitter level and helps keep this safety mode switched on. Effectively, we often return to social networks not for content, but to scratch our locus coeruleus, to get confirmation I am in the pack, I am seen. But do you know what gives me hope? The era of this button is ending. Algorithms still work perfectly, but right now a fundamental shift is happening in the very foundation of our interaction with information. And it was this interaction that was used to define our profiles. We have reached and passed the peak of efficiency for graphical interfaces. And effectively, this is already a past stage, even if it is not so obvious yet. We built an ideal digital prison out of buttons and screens, and so many cultural and social mechanisms have stuck to it that I see no way to radically change anything. And I want to change it. I do not really like it when interactions are based on manipulation bypassing the rational neocortex, and the main noticeable result is the polarization of society. But the destruction of the interface as a foundation looks like a quite viable exit. I am a designer who adores fonts, buttons, systems. But I will be very glad if for the next 10 years we observe a decline in the importance of my profession. Why did we build all this just to delete it? About that in the next video. We built everything just to delete it.